Today we're going to start taking a look at Lesson 4. So on Lesson 4, you're going to be using what you learned in the previous lessons 1 through 3, where you were taking a look at place value and the fact that if you have 10 times 10 or 10 squared, you can get yourself 100. If you multiply a number by 10 squared, for example on this one, 2 times 10 squared, we know 10 squared is 100, so 100 times 2 would get us 200. And these things link also to really nicely with the metric measurement system. And so this is what we'll be looking at. What I'm going to start with, however, is just taking a look at our place value chart in relation to this. So we happen to know that in this case, if you have a whole, a 1, that it's the same as a meter. A meter. And so this little tape right here that you have handy as well goes through and it shows you the relationship. So I'm going to start here at 0. I'm going to pull it on through so you can see that a meter equals 100 of those things all the way to the end right here. So it's 100 centimeters. So therefore, if you happen to have something like that, and what you're looking at is centimeters, if we have 100 of them, so 1/100th or 1 centimeter is right here. Centimeter. One thing that we don't talk about very much, though, is tenths. 1/10th of a meter is a decimeter. D-E-C-I. Meter, decimeter. And then if you go even smaller, these little tiny ones here, those are millimeters. And so we can see that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 of these is the same as 10 centimeters. So therefore, if we divide 1 centimeter by that, that's going to bring us over here. So in a meter, you're actually going to have 1,000 of those centimeters in order to get all the way to 1 meter. So this right here, we can label this one millimeter. M-I-L-L-I, meter, millimeter. So this is a meter, this is a decimeter, a centimeter, a millimeter. Now let's go the other direction. Here's one that we don't use very often either, and it's called a decameter. D-E-K-A, meter, decameter. They're all one word. I just don't have very much room to write them. And then over here, if you've got 100 of them, it's a hectometer, H-E-C-T-O, hectometer. If you have 1,000 meters, this is your form of measurement when you're on the road in Europe or in Central America, South America. It's pretty much most of what the rest of the world uses other than miles. They call it kilometers. K-I-L-O-M-E-T-R. Kilometer. So this is what you're going to be looking at today, is these relationships and things. And so, for example, if you have a meter and you break it into 100 equal pieces, centimeters, it's going to be getting smaller. So you'll remember from last week that if it's breaking up and it's getting smaller, instead of multiplying, you're actually going to be, well, actually, yes, you will be multiplying because there are many, many centimeters to make up 1 meter. So if you have 1 meter and you figure out what 1 centimeter is, if you have 1 of these, it's the same as 100 of these. It's the same as 1,000 of these. They are the same. Now, if you wanted to think about if you only went 1 meter, how much of a kilometer would you have gone then? Instead of multiplying, your number's not going to get smaller. Because you saw it, I was able to lay a meter out on my desk and pull it across this. A kilometer is closer to what we have, and when we look at miles. So what I just showed you is a very small part of a mile. So it's 1/1000th of a meter, or you could also do it decimal style. Here's the tenths place, the hundredths place, the thousandth place. It's 1/1000th. We read this out loud as 1/1000th. So 1 meter is the same as 1/1000th of a kilometer. It is 1/100th, or 0.01, 1 in the 100th place. It's 1/100th of a hectometer, and it's 1/10th of a decameter, DEKA meter, or 1/10th of a decameter. Okay, so now what we're kind of looking at is some of these types of problems. So within this, if you're looking at, like we started out, I was talking about what we did last week, you have 2 meters, kind of like a yard, as far as like thinking about how long 3 feet is. A meter is very close to that, and so 2 meters is really close to like how tall, fairly tall grown-ups are, if they're 6 feet tall, 2 yards tall, that kind of thing. So if you have 2 meters, you have 2 full of these measurement tapes that you made, and then you got to think about how many centimeters is that. So if I have all of this, and it's all straightened out, all of it together adds up to 100 centimeters. So if I have 2 of those, it's going to be 200 centimeters. And then when we go to write it as an equation, 2 times 10 squared, using an exponent, that's equal to 200. And so on these ones, what you can do is take a look and go, I know that 108 centimeters, 100 centimeters gets me 1 meter, and then if I have 8 more centimeters, I know that's 8. Oh, actually, that's incorrect. It's going to be in the tenths place. Remember, because a tenth is a decimeter, and then 100th is your centimeter. So it's 1 whole meter, no decimeters, and 8 centimeters, 8/100ths of a meter. So now if we say this, we say 108. We're not multiplying because our answer isn't going to get any bigger. It's actually going to get smaller. We're dividing by 10 squared because we're dividing by 100 because there are 100 centimeters in a meter. If we divide it by that, remember what happens. Our 8, which is in the ones place, we're dividing by 100. The 8 lands in the hundredths place. So if this is the hundredths place, then we know right next to it is the tenths place, and we have a decimal, and then we have a whole. Let's take a look at the next one. 2 49/100ths of a meter, and we're converting it to centimeters. So if we just copy this over and we say 2 49/100ths of a meter, we know then if there's 100 centimeters in a meter, 2 is in the ones place, we're going to multiply times 100, so the 2 is going to land in the hundreds place. The other 2 numbers are just going to follow it. So 2 is the hundreds place, 4 is in the tens place, 9 is in the ones place. Now in order to make that into an equation, we're going to start with our original number, 2 49/100ths of a meter, and we're multiplying because our number got bigger. And we're multiplying by 100 because there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So this is how we represent 100 using an exponent. And we've already figured out our answer, so that's just going to move on over here, 249. So all we're really doing is we're thinking about what's happening in here, and we're expressing it. Are we multiplying or are we dividing? And we're going from meters to centimeters, so it's always going to be 100, either that we're dividing by or that we're multiplying by. The next one is going to get a little bit more complicated because it's the thousands. You're going to be looking at the millimeters. So I'm going to do one more of these, and then we'll move to those millimeters down here. 50 centimeters to meters. So we just copy this over. We're taking out the words. 50, we're moving the numbers. 50, 50 centimeters. This is the same thing. cm is equal to, right there, 2 is equal, meters, that's right here. And we know that if there's 100 centimeters in a whole meter, we know then that it's going to be a half of a meter. So it's 50 out of 100. So we're going to divide by 100. So that which is in the 0 place now is actually going to land in the hundredths place. So here's the hundredths place. We know the number right next to it goes to the tenths place. We also, too, know that 50 out of 100 is half of 100, and so 5 out of 10 is also half. 5/10 is the same. So our number got smaller, so we know, because of that, we're going to be dividing. And now we can just move our numbers on over. 50 centimeters divided by, what did we divide by? We divided by 100 because we were working with centimeters. 2 equals 50 hundredths. Okay, now let's move to the millimeters. I'm going to fold this so it can kind of get it a little easier to work with. I'm going to kind of cruise on down a little bit because these get a little bit more complicated. This time, we're going to move it on over again. We're going to take out these long words and we narrow it down to just simple stuff. 65 millimeters. Here's the symbol for millimeters. So we're going to move our 65 on over. 2 and equal are the same. M for meters. We know that there's 1,000 millimeters in a whole meter. So that which is in the ones place now is going to land in the thousandths place because we're going to divide by 1,000. So if this is the thousandths place, the number next to it is going to go in the hundredths place, and we know we're not going to have anything in the tenths place. So 65 millimeters is equal to 65 thousandths of a meter because there's 65 of these to take the whole space of a meter. So now we've got to turn it into an equation with an exponent. In order to do that, we're going to copy again 65, and we know we're getting a smaller number, so we're dividing by 1,000. We're not going to use 10 squared this time because that only got us 100. If we have 100 and we multiply that times 10 again, that gets us 1,000. So that's 10 times 10 times 10. 10 times 10, 3 times gets us there. And the answer that we got when we did that, we know that the 5 is in the ones place, and it's going to land in the thousandths place if you're dividing by 1,000. So the 5 goes in the thousandths place. The number next to it goes in the hundredths place. We had nothing in the tenths place. So that's our answer. When we make it into an equation equa means you're going to have an equal sign in it. Now let's take a look. This is going from millimeters to meters. Now we're going to go meters to millimeters. So remember how big a meter is. It's about a yard long. And so if we're going from those to millimeters, we can fit 1,000 millimeters into every single meter. So we know if we have 4 whole meters, we're going to end up with at least 4,000 millimeters. In this case, 9/10, we're really close to 5 meters in that case. So it's going to be more than 4,000. It's going to be close to 5,000 millimeters. So let's move everything over again. So in this case, we've got meters and meters. So let's get rid of our words. 4 and 92 hundredths of a meter is equal to how many millimeters? We're going to put that there. We know that if we're dividing by 1,000, that which is in the ones place now is going to land in the thousandths place. I'm hoping we actually have enough room to write this. So we know if we have the thousandths place is where the ones place is now, this is going to get pretty small, isn't it? So we're going to have nothing in the tenths place. And in that case, remember we had this was in the ones place, this is in the ones place. So we're going to have nothing in the hundredths place because there's nothing to the left of that number. There's nothing bigger than the 4. So these just get smaller. The 4 goes in the thousandths place. The 9 goes in the 10,000ths place. The 2 goes in the 100,000ths place. So if you have 4 92 hundredths of a meter, what you actually have in millimeters is 492 hundred thousandths of a meter. But wait a second, this is going the other direction. That's if we divide it, isn't it? So that's a mistake. So if you had 4 meters, you know you're going to have 4,000 millimeters is what it's asking us. Remember that? So we're not supposed to divide. We divided on this one. We can't divide on this one. So 4 in the ones place is going to be in the thousandths place. This will be in the hundreds place. This will be in the tens place. Nothing will land in the ones place. So this one, because we're going from something little to something bigger, we know this little thing is a part of something bigger. So our answer will be smaller. It will be part of something bigger. In this case, though, we're seeing how many of these little pieces fit into this big one. And we know now, let's go ahead and move this on over, 4 92 hundredths. We have to multiply, because it's going to be many, many, many millimeters if we have 4 meters. Many, many of them. Remember my mistake. Take care of that. Times 1,000, because there's 1,000 millimeters in a meter. So here's our 1,000, and it's equal to 4,920. So I think it's time to take some notes. What I would like for you to do is take note of this. This I wrote for myself. So in this case, to rename meters to centimeters, like we did at the beginning, multiply by 10 squared. To go from meters to millimeters, you're going to multiply by 10 cubed. 10 times 10 is 100, times 10 more. 10 hundredths gets you to 1,000, because there's 1,000 millimeters in a meter. To rename centimeters to meters, you're going to divide by 100, because there's 100 centimeters in a meter, so you'll divide by 10 squared. 10 times 10 is 100. To do millimeters to meters, divide by 10 cubed. So that's a 3 there, 10 cubed. 10 times 10 is 100. 10 100s, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and so on. 10 of those get you up to 1,000. So if you need to, go ahead and hit pause right now so that you can copy this down. It'll be really helpful with the practice problems I'm going to have you do this evening, and we'll check in class tomorrow. So hit pause if you need to, so you can copy. I'm going to go ahead and continue on. So in this case, we're going 3 millimeters, 2 meters. We're going from something small to something big, so it's only going to be part of that big thing. So I'm going to start by knowing that if I'm going from something little to something big, using our notes, we were dividing, because it's only going to be part of a meter. So if we have 3 millimeters, that which is in the ones place is going to land in the thousandths place. So here's our decimal, our tenths place, our hundredths place, our thousandths place. So if we have 3 divided by 1,000, which we note as a 10 with an exponent of a 3, it's going to equal, here's your decimal, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. 3 thousandths of 1 meter. Let's look at that. Here's our meter tape right here. So here's 1, 2, 3 millimeters is 3/1000th of a whole meter. So see how big this is, 3/1000ths. Here's the whole meter. Oops, taking my paper up. That's a really small part of that. Okay. In the space below, list the letters of the problems where larger units are converted to smaller units. So in that case, we would just look and see larger units to smaller units, larger units to smaller units. So going from, as far as thinking about millimeters to meters, things like that, then you're going from small to large. Okay, I'm going to take a look at one last one of these and give you your problems for tonight. This is asking you to read aloud and then write the equivalent measures. Write an equation with an exponent that you might use to convert. That's what it's asking for. So this one they gave us in an example. So if it's 2 and 638,000ths of a meter, we know that there's 1,000 millimeters in 1 meter. So if this is here, each one of these in this meter place right here, if this is 2 whole meters, we know each 1 meter becomes 1,000 millimeters. So if there's 2 of those, 2 times 1,000 is 2,000. And now our other numbers just carry on over with it. They don't change order. They don't have zeros put between them. 2 is in the thousands place because we multiplied by 1,000. 638. And then your equation, this becomes 2,638. 7 centimeters is going to go the exact opposite of that, because 7 centimeters is only a small, tiny part of a meter. Remember, it takes 10 centimeters to get up to a decimeter, so it's going to be a really small part, 7 out of 100. So if we divide that by 100, we know we're going to end up with 7/100ths. 7 divided by 100 lands in the hundredths place. So we start by saying 7 divided by 100, here's our 100, is equal to 7/100ths. Let's shoot for the hardest one down here, shall we? We know that, oh, wow, if this is 5/1000ths of a meter, 5/1000ths of a meter, and we want to go from meters to centimeters. Remember on your notes, to go from meters to centimeters, you multiply by 100. Multiplying by 100. Let's take a look at that place value chart again. Pick it up off the floor. So if we have 5/100ths of a meter, 5/1000ths of a meter, that's going to be over here, 5/1000ths of a meter. It's asking us to convert it to centimeters. So to go from this much of a meter to centimeters, we're going to multiply by 100. So if we're doing that to get to centimeters, we multiply that by 100. Let's see what happens. If we multiply this one, so we have 5/1000ths. We're going to say times 100. We know we're going to have these zeros, right? All these zeros. 0 times 5, 0 times 0, 0 times 0. Now we've got, this is in the tens place, so here's the 0 for the tens place. That's going to be a 0. That's going to be a 0. 0 times 0 is 0. Now we go 100 times 5, so we have to put in our zeros from our 100. 1 times 5 is 5. And then a couple more zeros, which don't really matter too much. 0, 0, 5. We have 3 place values. 1, 2, 3. So it would be 5 decimeters. 5 decimeters in this case. So if we're going to multiply that, it's going to be, then in that case, 50 centimeters. 50 centimeters is what it becomes. So in that case, here's what we've got. We've got 1, 2, 3 zeros. Oh, sorry, 2 zeros. 5 is in the thousandths place. that many meters. We're converting meters to centimeters, so we're going to multiply times 10 squared. So remember, this actually gains 2 place values. So it ends up in the 10th place. So this gains 2 place values. So it ends up in the 10th place. So a half of a centimeter. So I had this incorrect. A half of a centimeter. So when you do out the math, sometimes it really helps. Okay, so here are your homework problems I'm going to have you do. There's only 4 of them. These you're going to bring to class tomorrow, and we'll have the answers and we'll go over them on the board. So I'd like you to go ahead and hit pause after I read them to you. Just make sure we know what all it says. Convert using an equation and an exponent, like we just did, 2 meters to centimeters. So you know 2 meters is more than what you could see with your measure, because it's going to be 2 of those. And then you're looking at how many centimeters is that. So it's going to be way more. 1 meter is 100 centimeters. You're figuring out how many 2 meters equals. And then you write your equation over here. So remember how we had it meters to centimeters, where we just took these words, we made them into numbers, and then you had to figure out, are you going to have a multiply or a divide in here? And then you're going to have your exponent with your 10, thinking of how many centimeters are in a meter. That's what you make your 10 to an exponent. And what's it equal to? 40 millimeters to meters. So looking back in your notes, if you're going from millimeters to meters, think about that. Are you multiplying or dividing? So we're taking these numbers, we're converting them into this. Millimeters becomes millimeters, meters becomes meters, 2 becomes equal. So think about it. In this equation right here, you're going to have either a multiply or a divide, and then you're going to have 10 with an exponent, and then is equal to what? The last part of this is kind of like a little word problem. If you have 3.9 meters of fabric, how many centimeters of fabric is that? Now, Mr. Ross's thumb happens to be 4 centimeters in length. I'd like you to express that length in meters. Think about that. His thumb is nowhere near a whole meter now, is it? Think about multiply or divide. All right, I'll see you with your answers tomorrow.